Dual flush toilets are fairly expensive, and a lot of people are replacing their older low flow 1.6 gallon flush toilets and trying to save water by having a small flush for the liquid waste, or number one, and a big flush for number two, or the heavier waste, or solid waste. I decided to see if I could minimize the flush on my regular good old trusty 1.6 gallon Kohler replacement low flush that was done about 1992, and then just hold the handle down for the larger flushes. So that's the concept. Here are the tools. All you need is a pair of pliers and a yardstick. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we have to understand is that the flush is controlled by a little flapper valve or flush valve, and this in turn is connected to a chain, and the chain is connected to the flush handle via a rod. You'll notice in the schematic that there is a small little float midway on the chain. This little float is held up by the water buoyancy and provides an upward force to help keep the flapper valve open. It is not sufficient to open the flapper valve by itself, but if assisted by the chain, the flapper valve will open and the float can keep the valve open until the water level drops. If your flapper does not have this float, it can still be modified, and I'll talk about that later in the video. So the object of this project is to simply raise the little float higher up on the chain. This will shorten the time of the flush and allow the flapper valve to close sooner. We just have to determine the number of inches to raise it. So let's begin. Okay, so the first thing we do is remove the lid to the toilet, and notice right away that you see there's a rod connected to the flush handle that goes to the center of the tank, which is where the flapper valve is located. Next, we see the flapper valve, and now here is a typical flush. Okay, so let's determine just how far the water drops for a standard flush. First of all, we measure what the water is when the tank is full. Then we measure what the water is just when the flapper closes. This will give you the total change in water level for a single flush. Okay, so we determined that it takes 5.5 inches to get a 1.6 gallon flush. If we want to cut that in half, we should raise the float about half that, or 2 3/4 inches. Alright, we're ready to get started, so let's remove the flapper valve and chain. We start by turning off the water, draining the tank, and then reach in and just unsnap the flapper valve from the hinge. Okay, I'm going to remove the flapper valve. It's attached, just snapped on to the bottom here. You just lift carefully so you don't done it. I've already unsnapped it so it comes out easy for you. Just pull the flapper valve out and lay it by the toilet. Alright, the little styrofoam flapper float is held on by 2 C washers, one on the bottom and one on the top. The C washers have a little slot in them, and it just slides on and off the chain with a little bit of snap. So take your long nose pliers and simply unsnap the top C washer and place it to the side, and we'll get started with the next. Okay, top washer is removed. I'm going to lift the little float high enough to get it out of the way. Okay, so after we've removed the washer and moved the float up, I've now replaced the washer that I removed about 3 inches above the bottom washer that was left. I use 3 inches because I want a little bit shorter flush. Recall that we determined a 2 3/4 inch from our earlier measurements, but this can be adjusted according to what gives you the best flush, and eventually you'll find the right height. Okay, now all we do is take the bottom washer off, slide the float down, and replace the top washer, and we're done. Okay, this is a short flush. Push and release. That's it. Now a long flush, holding the handle down, we just hold the flapper valve up and you can make the flush as long as you want. Okay, this is a short flush. That's it. This is a long flush. Press and hold the handle down for 1, 2, 3, 4, however long you want. That's about a 1.6 gallon flush plus a little. This picture shows 3 flappers. The 2 on the left are non-adjustable flappers compared to the one on the right, which was similar to the one we talked about earlier. These are trapped air flappers that get their buoyancy by trapping a little bit of air inside when they're down, and when they are actuated, the air dribbles out or bubbles up and the flapper becomes less and less buoyant and eventually closes. You can change the timing of the flush by simply adjusting the size of the hole that the air dribbles out of, and this in turn will speed up the flush a little bit. The alternative to that is simply make the flapper a little bit heavier and counteract the buoyancy of the trapped air bubble. This can be done by adding a non-corrosive little nut or washer, such as a brass nut. On top of the washer, just slide it down the chain. So a friend had a little blue one like the one on the left. He simply popped the cap that's stuck in the nose of the flapper, and this opened the hole such that the flush was a little bit too fast. So we put a little piece of plastic inside of it to narrow the opening a little bit, and that made a nice shorter flush.